Frank, it has been a few weeks, but and I will touch on that in a moment. But welcome. It's Sunday afternoon, 1:30 Pacific. Actually, we're about 3 minutes early. How about that? 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern. Everyman BJJ podcast. How's it going with you?
It's going good. Yeah, we got a great guest that's coming on today. He's not a big name, but his story is amazing, and it's also educational for a lot of people out there. If you're a white belt training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you're like, hey, where should I train? How do I know who's legit? Well, our guest today, Nick Huntington, he's got a story. You're going to remember this story for the rest of your life, and it's got a lot of great vignettes in it that can help you if you're a young jiu-jitsu player, can help you make better decisions, finding the right academy for you. Basically, Nick got wrapped up in basically kind of like, he kind of like a fake black belt kind of thing. I mean, so, and it's an interesting story. It's kind of, he said it was pretty embarrassing for him. And then he went back. He went from black belt, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, to white belt. He was getting tapped by like blue belts. He had a black belt. He was getting tapped by blue belts and purple belts. And so, and he went right back to the bottom at white belt, started all over again. I've trained with Nick. It's a great story. So I'm looking forward to that. And part of the thing is, you watched UFC 261 last night. I did. Live crowd there in Jacksonville. That was super exciting. So I was just rearing to go. A lot of goodies in there to talk about. But it sounds like Nick just is waiting in the wings to join us, so we can work him in and start to tell his story. So hold tight. I mean, I promised you, I've been a journalist for years, newspapers, TV, worked at Ultimate Fighting Championship. I've told thousands and thousands of stories. This is a good one. You're going to want to stay tuned for this. So.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Before we do that, I just want to make a mention of something in prior episodes. I want to mention, sometimes, when you see me looking down, I'm looking at a computer, or if I look distracted, a couple things going on. Okay. One is, I'm tweeting out the show, and doing some social media work background, but also I gotta say, recently I was a little distracted. My wife just went through a severe adverse reaction to the second Moderna shot. And so we had some health stuff going on. And I want to just apologize to you and to our viewers. I know I seem a little distracted there recently. It's, it's just I got, little things going on with her and her health. And I was trying to take care of some other business there while I could. So my apology. But let me just reach over and get Nick on board for us. Nick, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Very well. Well, I want to first introduce myself. I'm Noah, and I want to also say welcome to the Everyman BJJ podcast. We're live, and I've got Frank here in the middle. So welcome.
Hey, it's nice to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks
so
for,
Nick,
inviting me.
Nick and I have known each other, probably 10, 11 years. We've been training partners. We've had some mat wars in the gym. I've seen him from the time he was a white belt. I think Nick knew me from the time I was probably, I don't know. I don't know.
You came over to Drysdale's when you were a brown belt.
It's crazy to think that I've been a black belt now for 11 and a half, 11 years. That's kind of crazy to think of it a black belt. But Nick came in there. Nick was, I tell you, a tough, hard-nosed guy. Like, Nick was the kind of guy, no matter what, no matter who you were, he was going to come after you. So anyway, Nick, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and let's just dive in. You have, I've been familiar with your story for some years now. I don't know that have you ever publicly told this story, Nick?
No, no, I never wanted to tell this story. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's also like a bit of a cautionary tale, as you said before. So I think it's probably beneficial to tell it, beneficial for other people, for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So tell us about your journey. Let's go back. When did you first start? When were you first interested in jujitsu, and where did you sign up? Without telling us the name, you and I agreed. I'm like, you don't really need to
right.
tell the name of the instructor, but just tell us
It's
about
it's
your
it is
interest.
kind of pertinent to the story, but however, we'll leave his name out of it.
Okay.
But I got interested in jujitsu as many of us get interested in jujitsu through MMA, through UFC. I saw UFC, I saw, how effective jujitsu was in that, and I wanted to learn it. So, I started Googling and I looked for places to train here in Vegas. And at the time, there was a Mika Jiu-Jitsu, and then I also found this other school run by I don't want to say the name, but he was a prominent name in Jiu-Jitsu, like
Yeah, a big
punch,
name.
big name.
Yeah.
And so you think, oh, this is gonna be like the real Jiu-Jitsu, like this is gonna be the stuff that you really want to learn, right? And so I actually reached out to sent an email to like Mika and asked them like what they do, and they just like said, oh yeah, come by and check it out. And then I saw this other place, and so I went over there and I went and checked it out. And it was
So you did, just to be clear, because I used to train with Mika and I got a couple of my belts from Mika. I'm very fond of Mika. I like Mika a lot. It was great
yeah,
there. You never trained with Mika. You had just
I
you had
never went.
inquired.
No, I
Yeah,
didn't.
you
I
you
just
had inquired.
inquired,
Yeah. And
and
so but
then
you instead you wind up going to this other jujitsu place, and that's where
yeah,
your experience starts. This was not an experience with Mika, just to be clear. Okay. So
right,
you
right.
you you go to this place, this place that you're looking at, you're like, oh good, the real stuff, the real jujitsu.
Right, the real jujitsu. Um, and so, I went there and the guy was there. He was on the mats, and they only did like these one-on-one classes, right? And so he wanted me to do a first lesson. And so I was like, okay, I'll do a first lesson to check it out. And in the first lesson, they teach you some really really basic stuff, like they show you like defending a choke with two hands, like
Yeah, the college
stuff
shit. Yeah, okay.
that is like no, like actual, like a rape choke,
Oh, okay, okay,
with two
okay.
hands, like grab your neck type of choke.
Yeah.
And it was all very self-defense oriented. Um, but you just would like do these techniques that were laid out for each lesson. There was like lesson one, and it went all the way through like lesson 200, and he had them listed out on the wall, and you would learn these specific techniques, and then you would review other specific techniques, right? Some of the
So is
lessons
it
were
just
just
you? Is it just
completely
you and
new.
the professor? Is it just you and the professor, Nick, when you go to class, or is it you and some student of his who's teaching you?
It was just me. Well, exactly. So he had other people who were like students there, like purple belts or blue. They were wearing purple belts or blue belts or whatever. They were teaching the classes. And he was there on the mats, but he didn't actually teach people. He would just be there. He would supervise. He would, see what was going on. He would say hi to you. He would talk to you, but he wasn't the one who was actually like teaching you.
But the class
Eh,
consisted of you and the blue or purple belt who's teaching you, and there's not like 20 people on the mats, though. There's not like a
Correct.
room full of
That's
people.
that's right. It's just the two of you working together.
Okay.
Um,
You didn't find that unusual because you didn't have anything to compare it to. You didn't know what to think, so you just thought, well, that's normal.
exactly. Yes, exactly. So I didn't have any frame of comparison. Um, I had other martial arts training, like I had done, you know, karate as a kid, and I had wrestled in high school, but I didn't have any experience in jiu-jitsu or what it would be like in jiu-jitsu,
How
right?
much were you paying per class, Nick? I mean, since was it like a per class pay thing, or
Yeah, it was a perfect class pay thing, and at that time, I think it was like 60 or $70 a class.
so it was a private
Um,
lesson, like you were saying? Every
yes,
class was a private lesson, pretty much.
exactly.
So
That's
this
the way
got
it was.
expensive real quick. This got expensive quick.
It could, yeah, very much. Um, and so I did the first class, and I thought it was pretty cool. You know, I learned a couple techniques. You know, and they kind of go over some of the basic stuff, like things that maybe in jujitsu, I think it might have, like when I say in jujitsu, like in sport jujitsu, when you go to a class, it might be beneficial for beginners to learn. Like when you're in the mount, why is the mount a dominant position? You know, and the reason for that is because somebody can punch you and you can't punch them back, you know. And there was in things like that that he told you, they are beneficial, but the knowledge that you gained there was purely academic because it would teach you this technique, but you would just practice it a couple times with somebody who's letting you do it with no resistance. And that was it. There was no like context into how this fits in or the timing and how it works or making it work
No
in a
live
real
rolling.
situation.
No live
No
rolling.
live
Not even live
rolling.
rolling.
Never live rolling. And
So so you go there that first day. You still you don't again. This is a time when there's not jujitsu, world class jujitsu at the click of a button. Right nowadays, you can go and geek out on YouTube and you can see world champion videos for free. You didn't. There's not a lot of jujitsu there. So even if the instructor is showing you very little jujitsu, it's all new to you because this is a new science, a new art.
right, this
So
is
you go
before
home.
jiu-jitsu really blew up into what it is today. Like it's really popular
Right.
now, and you
Right.
could mention jiu-jitsu to anybody, and they'll know what an armbar is, or you know
Right.
what a rear naked choke is, and stuff like that.
Right.
And you're even seeing kids utilize those techniques in fights in high school and stuff like that without any training. Like they just know that they exist. They see them in the UFC, and you know, it's more of a, it's more, there's more awareness about it in our culture now than there used to be at this time. And you know, this guy
So
had a
Nick,
big name. So
yeah,
that was the thing that actually really grabbed me was that, you know, his the legitimacy of his name was the thing that
he
grabbed
had the
me.
right
And the
name. He
reason
had the
why
right
I
name.
decided exactly. And the reason why I decided to continue to go back there was really for that reason, you know, because I believed at that time that I was getting real jujitsu, you know, and so I did the first class, and my first class was taught by this older gentleman who was like a purple belt, and so I decided that I would go like once a week because that's what I could afford at the time, and so I did that for a few months, right? Just going once a week. And then he came to me and he was like, "Hey, if you want to do this instructor program, then you can do that, and it can help, you know, pay for the cost. You know, so you'll be learning to teach, and then you'll be teaching these classes, just like these other people were,
Yeah.
and then you won't have to pay." So I started doing that, and you know, I kept going in it, and now I was going more because I was doing this instructor program, and I was teaching classes there, and I got really into jujitsu. I like started, you know, getting into tournaments, like watching them. I started following like ADCC and like looking up what the big names in jiu-jitsu were at that time. And I
You
found like
weren't competing
tele
in tournaments. You were watching
no,
tournaments.
I wasn't competing, but I would like watch them, look up videos on the internet of, those things and um and so at the time like Marcelo Garcia just like was exploding onto the jiu-jitsu scene through Abu Dhabi because he just like started submitting everybody, won Abu Dhabi. And so I was like, oh, this guy is really good. And so I started looking up some of his stuff and I started trying to like emulate this, and then I started learning more about like what jujitsu was, and I wanted to do real live training, right? So I got some of the other like instructors there. I convinced them to like come in and we would roll and we were doing stuff like that. And I remember one time he saw us doing that, right? And so he saw me trying to do like a butterfly sweep. And he would always get really angry if he saw us doing like because this is jujitsu against jujitsu. You can't do this. This is sport jujitsu. What we do is for the street, for self-defense. This is he considered it like bullshit. But but the real sad part about that is that it really hindered any of those people who stayed there from learning actual jujitsu because they couldn't ever implement these techniques in any live situation. If somebody were to grab them or attack them, just practicing a technique on somebody who's not resisting does not give you the ability to do that in a real situation. It's just as bad as when you see these videos of people doing these ridiculous gun defenses and stuff like that, which by the way, he had a bunch of these crazy weapon defense techniques like people attacking you with a stick, knife, gun, all kinds of crazy self-defense techniques against these things. And a lot
Did
of
he get
them,
upset? Yeah. A
go
lot of
ahead.
them what? A lot of them
A
what?
lot of them would get you killed if you tried to do them.
Now, did this professor, the professor of this academy, who we will not name, did this professor did you mentioned he get mad if you were live rolling with someone else? Did he get mad at that as well? Not just that you're doing a
Oh
sport
yes.
jujitsu technique.
He
Did he
he
get mad?
he would get
Would he break
out.
it up
He
and be
would
like,
get
"Don't
very,
do that, stop"? Yeah.
yeah, he would. And come to find out later on as I progressed as an instructor, I found out that the reason why he was getting so angry is that he didn't have the right business license to operate as a gym. So he couldn't actually have he was open as like a health and wellness center. You know what I mean? So he didn't actually have the proper insurance to cover himself if somebody were to get hurt training. So that's a real big reason as to why there was no live rolling. That and the fact that, I think that it didn't fit in with his really shady business model.
Was there, so do you
Um,
think that there was a financial incentive for that kind of system that per, every class you come to is a private class? Do you think that that was, he thought he could make a lot more money that way? Why do you think he chose that model?
yeah, I think that's exactly it. He had people teaching the classes that were not getting paid or getting paid very, very little. He was collecting all the money from those as private lessons. He could market it as more of a premium type of service, and yeah, he was just collecting money and from these people, and they weren't actually getting anything out of it, anything that useful out of it. You know what I mean? They were feeling like they got something out of it because they were learning these techniques, but they couldn't ever replicate those in a real situation. So they were paying all this money, and they weren't getting anything for it.
Now, how
And
far did you go, Nick, in this system? How far did you go in his system? How long did what belts did you earn under him?
I got a black belt from him. So
In how
I
many
was
years? In how many
uh,
years?
like 1.5 years. So
Did
yeah,
that raise an
year
alarm
and a
bell to
half.
you? Did a year and a
You
half,
know,
did that raise at the time, did that raise an alarm bell to you?
it didn't because because of who he was. It didn't raise an alarm bell to me, and the fact that I didn't know just how much time and dedication it took to get, in general, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Um, I didn't understand yet at that time when I received that black belt. I didn't understand yet how absolutely ridiculous that was. Um,
Yeah, because
yeah,
you would be the quickest zero to white belt to black belt that I've ever met. I've heard of some 3 years, some 3.5 years. You would take the cake. You'd take top prize. I
well, I
wouldn't know
mean,
anybody.
there's time minimums in the IBJJF belt rankings as it stands right now. I think you have to have at least a certain amount of time at blue, purple, and brown. So I think the minimum that you could probably do it is 3 years if they're following those standards
In 3 years,
laid
in
out.
3 years, to get it in 3 years for everybody out there, for the exceptional outlier, like the one in, a million that gets it in 3 years, you would have to be pretty much destroying almost everybody in class, and you'd have to go to major tournaments and pretty much be smoking everybody else and force your instructor to give you the black belt. I mean, you'd have to be on a tear, like just destroying some really good training partners and some of the best in the world probably to do that now.
And even at that, that would be, to your point, even at that, that would be super rare because a lot
Yeah.
of times if you're doing that, those instructors still don't promote you super quickly because
Yep, they'll
it
still make you
it
wait.
helps them because if you're out there just destroying everybody in tournaments, you're gaining experience, but you're also destroying everybody, representing their school. So
Yeah.
they want you to do
Yeah, if
that.
you're a
When you
purple
see those
belt
people,
tapping other good black belts, that makes the academy look good, right? Like if you're going to
yeah.
tournaments and you're a purple belt and you're smoking good black belts, it's a lot of prestige for an academy. So 1.5 years, you get the black belt. And Nick, if you could tell us in that 1.5 years, how many times a week average were you training and teaching and instructing? Like how many hours do you think you accumulated? I mean, how many hours, if you had to approximate, how many hours had you accumulated to get that black belt?
So after my first 6 months, I started going pretty much every day, and I was
Mm-hmm.
there for most of the the day because I'd be teaching multiple classes. So hours wise, I was there doing that fairly regularly every day, and for I would be there for probably 5 to 6 hours a day. Maybe I would teach like one or two classes in that time.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time was spent just repetitiously doing these techniques with other people, explaining them to them, teaching them. And so what I did gain was some, like I said before, like academic knowledge of what it was. But I didn't have the the time training, rolling, live rolling. The thing that actually makes you get better at jujitsu is that experience that you get on the mat in live training against another person who also wants to submit you, where you're both trying to do it. It's like trying to learn chess by just doing chess puzzles and never actually playing against a person. You know what I mean? You don't really learn when you're 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 just doing that one little piece. You have some knowledge, but you can never really apply these things in the flow of the game. You know what I mean?
How many, in terms of live training? So you had maybe what, 1,000, 1,500 hours, including your instruction, including, as a student, as an instructor there in the 1.5 years, would you say 1,000, 1,500? What's your best approximation of how many hours you had?
Yeah, probably somewhere in there. 1,000, more than 1,000. Yeah. Um,
And how much live, if you had to say live training, live rolling against a training partner, an opponent who's resisting, would you say more than 50 hours, less than 100 hours? How many hours would you say you had of live rolling there?
less than 100 hours, but I would try
Okay.
to do it as much as possible.
You would
And
try
I
to
had
sneak it in when
actually,
he wasn't
so
there? You tried to sneak it in
yes,
when he wasn't
that's
there?
exactly what I did, and this is where a lot of the
Okay.
rift and the disagreements between us came from, is because I had convinced some of the other instructors there to come in on the weekend, like on Sunday when we weren't open and when he wasn't there. We came in and we started rolling between us because I was like, we
Wow,
got to
that's top
practice
secret.
this.
That is
Yeah,
top
we
secret
got to practice
at
this
his
if we're going to
academy.
get better at it. And
Okay.
so they were like, yeah, we agree with
Conspiracy.
you.
Conspiracy.
And that actually is how I found
Snake.
out about the yes. But I just wanted,
You're a
I
snake.
wanted to
You're a
get
snake in the
better.
grass, as Connor said. A snake, as Connor said to your right. He's a snake in the grass. I tell you.
And yeah, so he actually came in one time while we were there and he discovered us rolling, and that's when he said, "You guys can't do this because we don't have the right insurance to cover this type of stuff. If somebody gets injured here, he could lose his business license or something like that." And so that's when I
Hmm.
found out about that. And that even goes to show, like, he was never really, prepared to teach martial arts to people. Like, it was just billed as this like health and wellness thing. Um, but he
Now,
saw
Nick.
me like trying to do a
Yeah.
technique. Like I mentioned this before, and I think this is kind of important because it goes to show like just how he was taking advantage of people. And I think he knew that he was taking advantage of them because he really did have real jujitsu technique. Um, I mentioned that I was trying to do this butterfly sweep on somebody that I had saw online. It was actually Jean-Jacques had shown this technique, and I saw it on
So
YouTube,
it's a way
and
legit butterfly guard sweep. Yeah.
exactly, it's way legit, and I was trying to replicate it, and I was not able to make it work correctly, right? I was messing it up, and he saw me, and he immediately identified what I was doing wrong, and he's like, "No, you got to do it like this. Watch." And he did it to me, and swept me over on my back and mounted me, and then he was like, "Here, do it like this," and he showed me how to do it properly, and then I did it. So he knew exactly what, he knew, but he wasn't showing that to us or to any of the students there. It was just the only what was written on the cards on the wall, these self-defense techniques
So he
that,
had watered down. He had watered down the curriculum. He was actually. You thought he had a very high jujitsu IQ, but he had watered down the criteria. Kind of like, this was more common in the old days, where before the internet, people just sat on knowledge, the secret techniques. They weren't out there, and a lot of people, a lot of very smart jujitsu players, just sort of kept it in their academy or kept it to themselves, or you had to pay for it. So
yeah.
he was. You thought he was a legitimate black belt, and he was smart and intelligent. He just watered down this curriculum and didn't want anybody to live roll because he felt he didn't have the proper licensing, and maybe it even fit into some business model. That's your understanding, Nick, or your feeling on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me
You're
ask you
right
this,
on
because
here.
this is fascinating. So the day comes, Nick is a brown belt, and Nick is getting promoted to black belt. Tell us about that day, the experience, the day of getting promoted to black belt, and what you felt, what that was like, and what does that do
It
to
was it
your
was
sense of self?
it was anticlimactic because it really was just like I was there, I was teaching, And he just came on the mats with a black belt and he handed it to me and he was like, "Here you go. You're now a black belt. It's time." And whatever. And there was just me and a couple of the other instructors and maybe like one student was there. Um, and it was very unceremonious. It was just like, "Here's your black belt and you're gonna wear this black belt now." And it's like that kind of threw some red flags for me. I was like, this isn't really the way it should go, you know? But, I felt good getting it at the time. But so I had mentioned to you, that we had kind of had conflict over the students should be training. They should have some type of live training. Um, and and so, as this progressed on, and and that was clearly never going to be a thing, I had decided, and a bunch of the other instructors there over time have left, right, for the same reason. Like it's obvious that he takes advantage of people, and he had also taken advantage of students. He had collected a bunch of money from students in cash for lessons, like paid in advance. And then he had closed down his school at the location that he was at and opened up at another location across town, and then would not refund those students. And they were calling the gym, and like I would answer the phone and they were telling me, "Hey, I paid $1,200 for lessons and he just up and moved. He never told me that he was going to move. I want that money back." And then I would have to relay this message to him. And I'm like, "Hey, man, these people are calling angry." And he would be like, "No, um, they can come here, they can drive here and they can do their lessons, but I'm not going to refund them." And I was being like put in this situation where I had to be like a middleman in this stuff, and I didn't want to be there. That's not something that I wanted to do. And so it got really uncomfortable in that way. And you know, that's another part of the really kind of shady business practices that he did there, where he took advantage of people. He collected money from them and then didn't fulfill their classes, wouldn't refund their money, and yeah, it was just so. I had left there, and I had gone to Texas to visit my mom. She lived out in Dallas, and so I looked up like jujitsu gyms in the area, and there was a 10th Planet School not too far away from where my mom's house was. And so I went over there, and I didn't tell them what my rank was, and I trained with them, and I rolled, and it was so fun, to just go practice like real technique and roll with people. But I got demolished by everybody pretty much. And so at that moment, I realized, oh man, I just wasted a bunch of fucking time, right? And I was like, man, so I came back to Vegas after visiting my mom, and I was there was a Naga tournament in town, and one of my friends was competing in it. And so I was there, and I saw flyers that Robert Drysdale was going to be opening a school here in town, and I knew him because he had submitted Marcelo Garcia, and he had those like nth dimension DVDs that he had released, and I had like downloaded uh, those off the internet. And so I knew who he was. I was aware of who he was, and that he was like super legit. And so I was like, I'm gonna go as soon as he opens. And he actually did like a seminar at his school a couple weeks before he very first opened. And I went there and I talked to him. I said, "Hey, Robert, I've been training at this school under this guy, and he gave me a black belt, and I know that I am not a black belt because I've I've done this. Where I went and rolled at this school, and I know that my level is just I'm just a white belt, you know. Um, and he was like, no, 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 you whatever belt he gave you, you are that rank, and you'll get up to there. And I was like, no, I don't think you understand. Because when I mention his name, that name actually carries some weight in the jiu-jitsu community, for the most part. And so he's like, if he gave you that belt, that's the rank you are. You can keep that. It's whatever. Just come in and train. And that's the way Rob used to be. He was always just come in and train. Don't care about anything else. Just come in and train, which is a beautiful attitude to have. And I'm very thankful that I got to train with him. And that's. But I said, look, I am a white belt, and I would feel way more comfortable if I just started over. And he was like, that's cool too. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. And so that's what I did. I came in and I went to that seminar, and I just came in and started training for real. And that's when I really started to understand like what jiu-jitsu was, and the training, and then you meet friends and you train with people, and it's a long process to get to black belt, but you just keep showing up and eventually you get there.
Yeah, so I was saying we're getting you. Noah and I are getting you. I mean, I think it was just last week you earned your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt legitimately this time. Legitimately, I believe it was my old friend Renee Lopez, who's people out there. If you know Jiu-Jitsu and you know high level competitors, I mean, the guy's one of the best in the world.
Yeah,
maybe the premier training partner of Mikey Musumeci, among others. And then Matt Villatora as well at Matt Vill's at the Vill's Academy there in Vegas. I wish I'd have been there. I wish I'd have gotten a heads up, but you've definitely earned it. Let's go back. We'll talk about that black belt, but I want to talk about, because what's interesting in all this to me, Nick, is the psychology involved. You mentioned, so you get the black belt, which you don't consider legitimate, and then you're kind of embarrassed. You go to 10th Planet, you're embarrassed by it. Then you meet Robert Drysdale, and you know that you're going to go into class, and Rob's like, where are your black belt? Where are your black belt? And you're knowing, like, so not only do you feel like you don't have a legit black belt, but even if you were like, hey, I like having the black belt, it's a bullseye on your back to go onto a mat and have a black belt, because the moment you're a black belt on the mat, you're everybody's Super Bowl. Every white belt, every blue belt, every purple belt, you're having an off day, whatever, nobody cares. You're their Super Bowl. They're usually going to come at you. So you'd have had a bullseye. It was already some very tough, those training sessions at Drysdale's when he first opened that school. I mean, Annie and everybody was coming through there, all the, tons of UFC fighters. I mean, it was murder on those mats for real. You know that. I mean, it didn't matter your size. You just went with everybody. And I remember we didn't have AC for a few months. We legitimately, in the summer, Nick, I think you were there. You remember? This is a true story. People think I'm making this up. Do you remember we went a summer without AC in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we had those hot fans blowing air on us?
Yeah,
remember that? And the windows would sweat. The windows would sweat. The windows were sweating like you've never seen windows sweat. I mean, it was like, and we were so gung-ho, those classes were packed. So people weren't like, think about how diehard and fanatic we all were back then. Anybody else today would be like, look, there's no AC, I'm not going. We were so fanatic, we were like, oh hell no, I'm going to class. I'll have that.
There was never any question.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, there was never any question.
But so the humility, because this is the thing, Nick, a lot of people would have had a negative experience. They might have stopped training jiu-jitsu. You didn't take a way out. What? Tell us about. I mean, I guess your tell us about your ego and why you were so humble about it. Tell us about um, why you were so determined to keep going. Because a lot of people come in, they train jujitsu, they're a white belt, they just quit. Any chance to quit? Oh, I'm hurt. I'm injured. I'm quit. I had a bad experience. I just got ripped off by this other professor. I quit. You kept going. Why? Why was it important to keep going and to stay to get the black belt? Legit black belt.
Um, well, I did. I fell in love with jujitsu. I really loved jujitsu from the start, but um, I wanted to have the legitimate skills. I wanted to be, you know, decent. I wanted to be able to hold my own, and I wanted to have real jujitsu skills that I could apply if I needed to, or whatever. And I wanted to continue to do jujitsu for um, the rest of my life. I still want to continue to do jujitsu for the rest of my life. Like I just I like um, I really enjoy having that ability to just control another person if I need to. And that's what jujitsu gives you. It gives you this power that if a situation happens, or whatever, you have the ability to control another person against their will. You see videos all the time of somebody trying to rob someone in Brazil, and the person gets them down on the ground and holds them down and keeps them there until authorities come, or whatever happens. And so there, I wanted that, and I realized that what I had, the path that I had taken to that point up to Drysdale's didn't give me that. It gave me a belt, but that belt was meaningless. It was just a belt, and I didn't have the skills that backed that up. And what I cared about was the skills, not the belt. That's really what it comes down to. Is I cared about having the skills, not about having the belt. And I think maybe for some people, if their goal is just to get the belt and to be able to show that off to other people, then yeah, maybe they would have quit as opposed to going through all the pain and blood and sweat and tears of actually earning a real jiu-jitsu black belt, you know. But for me,
When you got your black belt, and that was last week. When you got the black belt, um, tell us about that experience. What does that belt? You now have a black belt around your waist when you train. What? Tell us about that moment, that experience, driving home. What does that belt mean to you? The value of that belt now. What does that black belt mean to you?
it just to me it just means it's it's kind of like an acknowledgement of the time spent on the mats. It's just recognition for having spent, you know, 13, 14 years training, and putting that time in on the mat, and developing those skills and actually having those skills. And now, when I put that belt on, I don't feel like, oh, I'm not this thing. Like I feel like that's just the way it is. Like I know my level because I've put the work in, and I've rolled against, you know, other black belts. I've rolled against professional fighters. I've rolled against tons of people because I've put all of that time in. I have all of that experience. I've competed in tournaments. I've done the full thing. And so to get that recognition now feels very rewarding. It feels very good because I know, just like all those people know, and if those Matt and Renee, Matt and I came up together. We got our blue belts together at Drysdale's, our purple belts together at Drysdale's. we were really tough training partners. I've trained with Renee the whole way. He was a brown belt when I was a purple belt. He got his black belt a while ago now, but I kind of veered off into this other path of, you know, family and work and whatnot. And so I didn't have the same amount of time, but I never stopped training. It was just always a priority to me to, no matter what was going on in my life, to come to jujitsu. And that's the thing that's really transformative about jujitsu training is you come and you show up and you put in the experience and you put in the work, and over time you really develop these skills, and then you can take that and apply it to all different things that you do in your life, because you see that all it takes is putting in this work, and over time you can learn this skill. And it's like, um, there's a quote from like the I think it's the Book of Five Rings, right? Where it's like, once you know the way broadly, you'll see it in all things. I might be messing that up, but it once you find that way, you can apply it to a bunch of different things. So like in work, I know that like just you know putting in the showing up and doing what I need to do, and trying your best, and you learn from your mistakes. You know, you don't always succeed. You get beat a lot, but just coming back the next day is a victory in itself. And sooner or later, you're the one who's, winning on the mats and stuff like that. So
How
for me, that
what's the worst injury? What's the worst injury you've had? I remember you had a knee surgery, I believe. What's the worst injury you had to overcome in your jiu-jitsu journey?
um, I would say the worst one was when I tore some cartilage in my sternum back when I was a blue belt. I was rolling with somebody who was much heavier than me, and like I pulled half guard, and he fell on top of me, and my it just like kind of twisted. Like his weight came down on top of me, and my legs were closed in the half guard, and so it was like kind of twisted my torso, and I felt like this really, really painful pop in my chest, sternum area, and I tore some cartilage there. And that one, it just there's nothing that you could do for it, and it just took forever to heal. And that was probably the worst one. It bothered me for a couple years in
Wow.
total. And then I would say that the second worst is the knee. I had a bucket handle tear in my meniscus, and I had to. They went in and removed that part, and then the recovery process from that was, um, it was just you just have to go through it. But yeah, I've had
Now,
tons of injury. I've popped ribs, broken fingers, knee surgery, the chest thing. Yeah, it's a bunch of stuff.
yeah,
Shoulder injury, my neck,
you went,
like all kinds of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And you're what? You're 35 now, right, Nick?
Yeah, 35.
And I just saw you the other day at Whole Foods, which was serendipitous. Like that was a sign that, hey, I got to get Nick. I want Nick to invite him on our podcast and see if he'll talk about this. And double black belt Nick, the
Just
world's only double Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I don't know if there's
yeah,
ever
that's
been.
it.
You might have made history. Um, but you were telling me too that you're kind of bulking up because we always talk about there's that thing in jiu-jitsu, size doesn't matter, blah blah blah. And then I saw you, and it's like you were telling me you're kind of bulking up a little bit, and you feel better. You feel better on the mats, a little bit heavier and stronger. Tell us about that a little bit, sort of your mindset right now on your jiu-jitsu and your
You know,
size and power.
everybody says size doesn't matter, but size absolutely matters. and strength is probably the most important attribute that you could develop for any type of athletic endeavor. But technique is super important. And there's this Drysdale would say this, like you want to learn jujitsu from uh, like a lighter weight person because they have to develop good technique to be successful on the mats. The smaller guy has to have excellent technique to overcome the size, of someone who's bigger and stronger. A big, strong blue belt can easily stalemate a smaller black belt, especially if they have, some decent training. So you have to acknowledge that size and strength does matter, but having good technique also matters. When you see heavyweights who are really, really successful, Rob is not. He's a big guy. He's tall. He's heavy. He he but when you see the techniques that he uses, like he he can roll like a little guy. He can invert, he can, roll up on his shoulders, he can, do all of those techniques that the little guys do, and being able to do that is really important. It's it makes him, and you see that with like other really successful heavyweights too, like Buchecha is a good example. He has, a really excellent guard. And I think it's a testament to those guys to develop that technique. And then they also have the size to be able to back it up. And another point to that is that I think, having that extra muscle or strength, it's kind of like armor in jiu-jitsu. It protects you. Like the stronger that you are, the better that you are able to. For me, it feels like it provides some protection against getting injured. I get injured a lot less now after having gained a little bit of muscle and size. Um, my knees don't hurt or bother me like they used to. My shoulders are much more healthy. Things work better. And I think if all you ever did was jujitsu, jujitsu beats the shit out of your body. Like that's the reality of it. You know, we've all had tons of injuries, and if all you do is jujitsu and you never address those things, you never do something to help heal those up or kind of correct those problems, they just get worse and worse and worse over time. And then, you know, that could that could be detrimental to your longevity in jiu-jitsu. Like I said, I want to be able to do this into old age. And if you're going to do that, you kind of have to take care of your body and prepare it to be able to do that. And so for me, like getting stronger has been something that I can do outside of jiu-jitsu to kind of enhance my
How
jiu-jitsu.
heavy were you? Because when when I first started training with you 10, 11 years ago, you and I were, I mean, I think you might have outweighed me by 10 pounds, maybe 10, 12 pounds. We were, regular training partners. Now you're, quite a bit bigger than I am. So you were probably in the 150, 160 range,
Right.
10, 11 years ago. Now, what are you walking around at now? Stronger, but
Uh, currently I'm at about 200 pounds.
yeah. I don't know if we're
Um,
training partners anymore, Nick. I don't know. You just lost a training partner.
well, that's unfortunate, but it is what
I'm
it is.
kidding.
Um,
Nick's kind of like in my range now. I'm 250.
Yeah, you meet your new training partner, Nick. No agreed.
And
Blue belt, Enzo Gracie.
Enzo Gracie blue belt.
Noah, you've been waiting. What are your thoughts? And you've probably got some questions. And what's on your mind, bud?
Nick, congratulations on earning your black belt.
Thank you.
It's at times, hearing your story, today. Well, let me just step. I'm referring to earning your black belt. It feels good. You know, every time I hear a black belt tell their story about their journey and how they got to where they can legitimately wear the black belt and with honor, um, it's it feels good to see like there is a pot of gold at the other end of the rainbow, but that rainbow is laden full of pain. It's not an easy path. I started out a while ago, and I've had my fits and starts and stops and breaks, and then breaks, get more breaks. And it's good to see that. So congratulations
Yeah.
on getting a black belt. Um, you have a unique story. Rumi says that it's the cracks that let the light in, and part of your journey is a very unique one um, because of your experience with essentially a consumer fraud. And I'm sure that informed you in other parts of your life, just like jujitsu has. So my curiosity, is like whenever you go through something, and then you're like, to your saying of the book of five, was it five rings, um, that as you see it in one, you see it in all. You see it everywhere. Yeah, I'm sure you're pulling up the quote for me now. You're like, okay, enough of this. I got to Google this quote.
But
Um,
it's Miyamoto Musashi that said that. And it's, if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything.
um, yeah, you start to see it. He's like, there's fraud everywhere. Professionally, I'm a forensic and financial fraud examiner and financial due diligence. So that's kind of, I walk around professionally skeptical. It's hard to get me. There's levels of skepticism to conspiracy, and I try to stay on the more, well, what's, you know, probable, not what's possible. But this sounds like something that was not was highly improbable, but obviously possible to happen. Where you walked into a scam. How did that? How has that influenced you in your daily life? Have you become less trusting, or are you more discerning about things? Tell me
It
about that
it's
aspect.
Yeah, it definitely made me more discerning and more critical um, of just how I evaluate things, and you know making sure that you're getting something for what you pay. You see people like that, or situations like that, where it's clearly um, predatory behavior, and you know sometimes you want something so bad that you will ignore the red flags. You want this thing, and it's almost like a fantasy in your mind. It's not real, but you want that thing to be true so badly that you ignore so many of the red flags. And you know, I I learned that lesson hard in that one, you know. And I try to take that and apply it to other things in my life. But yeah, I would say that that's the thing that you have to really be super honest with yourself, and you have to not try. you have to try to recognize when you're almost lying to yourself to make something true that's not true, you know? And I was fortunate that I wanted I wanted to be good at jujitsu bad enough to where I put myself into the situation where it it taught me that this was bullshit, essentially he was just peddling bullshit. um and it was painful to do that, and I never wanted to tell this story to anybody, like when I first told it to Frank. I told it to him because I had mentioned it to someone else, and then it came up in conversation. They were asking me all these questions, and then it was like, well, I was in this situation where I couldn't really avoid saying it because this thing, it did happen. And as embarrassing as it was for me to kind of waste that time, you know um it's still a very valuable lesson. It's just one that I had to learn the hard way. And
Mhm.
the reason why I had to learn it the hard way was just that, like, I ignored the red flags, and I kind of wanted to believe in this fantasy. And then once that was broken, once I realized this is just fantasy, and if what I really want is, the real thing, then I need to be completely honest with myself and where I am, and go from there, And so that's that I started over. I was like, this isn't real, and I just, started over from there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It, I, my own, I do a lot of research online, and I read reviews online. And obviously, this was you were operating in an era before there was an extensive usage of online reviews where people can post things. Like, you can go on to Google Businesses and write reviews. And what you're describing is something that I believe I've read about online here in the Southern Nevada area in Las Vegas, where there is some establishment that has some things written similar to that. Yeah, this is an area rife with that scenario, with those ingredients, contextual ingredients, and it's actually, if you sit back and you see scenarios, to play off your quote, you see scenarios like that coming around in different ways. And it hits here for me, ground zero at home. Um, and I'm going to play out, I'm going to just express a couple of things, not to take us away from jujitsu, but as a side example. Congress gives pharmaceuticals liability protection on a rushed vaccine. Congress, so they have immunity from lawsuits on the vaccines. Vaccines are rushed out.
They had immunity in 1986 from all other vaccines too. There's a federal law as well. But yeah, this was of course not FDA approved. This was in the emergency authorization. But you're right. Yeah, you're correct.
Frank's much more well informed about these kinds of
No,
things.
You're right. I'm not correcting you. I'm just
no, yeah,
you're 100% right. You're 100% right. No.
And and there's a rush, and there's like just nonstop drilling it in all forms of media to do this, to do the thing, and there's restriction of what seems like freedom of movement with coming if you don't take one of these vaccines, which my wife is currently suffering from blood clots in her legs and her lungs from one of the vaccines that they're not even saying anything about. She was in ICU week before last for 4 days. And it was very close to where she had to have a thrombectomy to remove the clotting. And they were talking about running surgical devices up through the vein in her thigh, up to her, through her heart, into her lungs, to siphon out these blood clots. But, you know, like if you see elements, and I'm not talking conspiracy, it's just elements out there. So the elements are, and this is kind of a background kind of clinic here, what I'm talking about on how to be a skeptic and see things, which is, you know, sit back and what's the context? What's the environment like? So, you know, in your situation, you know, there's where the consumer has a difficulty measuring objective results, you know, and like whenever you get vaccines, how do you know it works? People are still getting, you know, you don't know it works, but you know, you have to rely upon some abstractness. There is a hallmark or a badge which is indicative of security and safety. Johnson & Johnson's a brand, and that's a name brand, you know? So when you see a name like that, that isn't quite automatic. You know, you've got to do a little bit more. Well, what's the hierarchy? What's the relationship between, you know, what's Johnson & Johnson? That's a global brand. And so, you know, that's trusted. And then timing of things. Can you get other feedback from others who've used the product? You know, for the majority of the time, people are like, yeah, I don't feel well for a day and I get better. And so, you know, this is, you know, that's science, pharmaceutical science, but in this area here, what you went through, now we have tools. You know, you have online.
Yeah, what's interesting, Noah,
yeah.
Just to add to piggyback what you said, what's interesting is looking at it, you know, going back 14, 15, 16 years ago when Nick first started his jiu-jitsu journey, you know, there just weren't that many choices. Like you said, Nick, that factored in. You didn't have 100 jiu-jitsu academies in Vegas like we do now, right? You had
Right.
2 choices. That was a big name. And so, you know, it was like, okay, you're just a happy camper. You got jiu-jitsu, you got a big name in your backyard. And you know, there wasn't, like you said, Noah, there weren't all of these reviews and whatever. So with limited information, you're just trusting the brand, you're trusting the name, and you don't know any different. You don't know what you don't know. And so it's, you know, to get back to, like, I just remember training with Nick in 2009, 2010, 2011, and beyond. And Nick didn't tell me the story of this happening. Like, Nick didn't tell me, somebody else had told me. So Nick wasn't going around like, hey, let me tell everybody. Like, that wasn't a thing. It was like there was a tight-knit group of us, and somebody who knew us, you know, mutually, another training partner, had told me that one day. And I was like, wow. And I just remember just thinking, like, and here I am, almost a black belt. And it really, like, I know for Nick it was embarrassing, but for me it was like it was an endorsement of his character, because I thought, man, how humble does a guy have to be just to renounce that and just come back here and start all over again? Like, you know, it's like, wow, like, you got to be a really humble person, and how honest. Like, again, we have a society right now where and Nick was talking about this, one of the problems people have is people aren't that honest with themselves. Everybody's quick to point fingers. I mean, we have a society now where we're quick to point fingers and talk about everybody else's flaws, and society owes me this. And instead of, like, just, you know, full personal responsibility to own our own shit, to own our own stuff, right? To fix our own stuff. And like Nick, I'm like, man, this guy's self-honesty is very high. Like, he's just really honest with himself, because a lot of people, like you said, just to be put on your resume, hey, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I got it from a reputable name. Okay, check that box. And I mean, you wanted the experience. You wanted it to be pure. You wanted to pay the price. You wanted the blow. You wanted to take the blows. You wanted to go through the fire. You wanted to sweat. You wanted it to mean something. And I know it was embarrassing for you, but I always, even as your training partner, Nick and I have had some battles. Like we had some battles in the gym. You know, it was always like I went at Nick. Nick came at me. You know, we always liked each other. We always respected. Probably the hardest eye poke I ever took in jiu-jitsu was Nick. Nick got me with an eye poke one day, like 2011, 2012. I could not see right out of one of my eyes for literally like 3-4 months. Like I was like, it was like a little foggy. I was like, is that ever coming back? It was one of those moments. I was like, is my eye ever coming back to the level that it was? It was incidental. It was inadvertent. But you know, we used to get after each other. But I always respected, like, this guy is a hard worker. He brings it. You know, you're not gonna tap Nick and then he's just gonna back down and then just roll over for you and let you whatever. It's not gonna go down like that. Like, he's gonna come at you harder. He's gonna have a short-term memory, and he's just gonna bring it. You know, a good roll, because it's like this guy's he's gonna bring it to you. He's not gonna run from the fight. He's not gonna just turtle up. So it's like you're a really good training partner, tough training partner. And I always knew that in the back of my mind. And I think there's a lot of layers to this cake. Number one, I don't know anybody else in the jiu-jitsu world, and I've met a lot of people that has Nick's story. So we're grateful you came on here and told us the story. And then number two, it's just like Noah was saying, it's all of us learning in life. Like, you know, a lot of us were naive, we're gullible, we just don't know what we don't know. And so you get older, you get to your mid-30s, your 40s, and then you become a little more skeptical about things, and you learn how to read situations better. But then the other thing I see here, and Nick, you talked about it, is personal responsibility, man. You owned it. You were honest with yourself. You know, you wanted the purity of the experience. You didn't just want the black belt. You wanted to take the blows. And I just think that, like, that's something, like, they say the mats don't lie, right? The mat doesn't lie. Like, the mat is a meritocracy by and large. It doesn't matter what religion, what color, what your socioeconomic, how rich, how poor, it doesn't matter. The mat does not care. Your training partners do not care. And to see you, I just saw that online on Insta, to see you finally, stick to it and get that black belt. Because I know, and by the way, this was something else, Noah. You mentioned the stuff with your situation and, what you're going through. And I know you've been going through a lot. And Nick, all of us here, what's interesting is we have 3 guys here, and all of us with someone we loved dearly, all of us have went through a hell, with somebody we love dearly, trying to put them back together again. And Nick, I know, your story too. I won't talk about it, but I know, like, you missed time. I saw the dedication to someone you loved. I saw that was, I was really impressed by you as a man, because I've seen you, like, how far you're willing to go. And Noah, I know the same with you, like, for someone that you loved, like, trying to get that person well again, dealing with some, some serious stuff. And just to see that, like, Noah, your character, and Nick, your character, it's like, wow, just like the level of love. Like, this is the kind of guy that gets a black belt, that just keeps showing up. I mean, I just to say Nick is extraordinary with the lengths he was going through to help his loved one. I saw, pieces of that. Noah, I know how your heart's designed. So that's another interesting thing here, is like, away from the mats, the real life stuff that hits us, Noah, like what you're going through now. It's not easy for you to even do this podcast. You've got so much going on. It's a big act for you to just be here and show up today and be able to do the podcast, because you've got so much stuff going on, trying to put, someone you love back together again and get them well again. And you're going through all that. And then on top of that, you've got work, you've got other things, you've got father responsibilities. You just got a lot of things. So, this is the real life stuff, this is the real life stuff that we all have. And what's interesting though, Nick, is something you mentioned earlier. it's interesting how, like, for me, when I was going through it with someone I love, like, the mat was a sanctuary. It was the one place in my darkest hours, man, when I was going through a divorce, when somebody I loved was really sick, like, I could go on the mats. You guys were going to try to kill me. There was no AC, but I wasn't thinking about nothing except for you trying to choke me or knee bar me or whatever, eye poke me, whatever. That's all I was thinking about. I was just like, all right, I got a problem in front of me. I got a Rubik's cube in the form of a human, 160, 170 pound, 180 pound human who's trying to choke me. I need to deal with this. And that was like, no matter what was going on, I could turn it off for 2-3 hours a day and relax my muscles and just get a little bit exhausted and relax. Like it gave me that, and I know it gave that to you too, Nick, because I remember like even when you had your knee, and I know how bad you wanted to get back on the mats when life stuff happened, and you always came back though. You always came back.
Yeah, well, to your point, like that's the thing that is really beautiful about jujitsu, and I think that's where the character development in jujitsu comes from. It comes from the fact that it is a meritocracy. It doesn't matter what color you are, socioeconomic background. You could be very successful in another job. You could be dirt poor and nobody on the mats. Everybody is the same, and you train, and it's there's no free anything. Like those things don't matter there. The only thing that matters there is the training. And when you're there in that moment and you're training, you don't think about anything. It's a form of meditation. Like you're just present in that one moment, and all of the pressures of family obligations or relationship problems or work problems or financial problems, whatever else is going on in your life, um, it goes away for that time. And the only thing that is there is, the problem in front of you, as you said. You're rolling with this guy. This guy's trying to choke you, and you're trying to choke them, and you know one of you is probably going to succeed, or you're going to get submitted. And either way, that's information, that's data. Like you learn from that, and you just try to come back and get better. And it forces you in that way to be very honest with yourself, because there is no escape from it. You know, you if you're there and you're training, you're it's either going to work or it's not. It's a zero sum game. You can't both, you know, be successful at the same time. So you learn, like you learn that way, and it's a process, and you gain that experience, and you grow from it, and you get really honest feedback, and it forces you to be honest with yourself, and then you can carry that into other things. That's the thing that drives the character development. People talk about discipline in martial arts and whatever. That discipline comes from that process of showing up and getting that honest feedback from training, and then coming back the next day. And whatever happens in your life, you will always have that place. And and that's the thing that I think, I don't know about for you guys, but that's the thing that is really, to me, beautiful about jujitsu, and what makes it something that has I want to continue to do well into old age, because it has been such a positive influence on my life in so many ways.
Yeah, I want to say something. So, no, I want you to interject because I know I took a little time from you, and I just want to say this, and then I want you to chime in and take us down the home stretch. Um, you know, I would say in my own jujitsu journey, and you guys know I've given a TEDx talk on this, and I've talked about ego. I thought a lot about ego. And part of the reason I thought about ego is I did see a lot of big egos in the fight world and in the sports world, and then even very successful people in the business world. And then I wrestled and grappled with my own ego a lot. Nick, you've been a training partner. And if I'm being honest with myself, that Frank's a guy who's like ultra competitive, doesn't want to lose anybody. You know that. I mean, anybody who's trained with me, or if you see me in the room enough, you're like, okay, this guy does not like to lose. And, I'm intense. And even though I do care a lot about my training partners, I do care a lot about them. But when it's time to go, like, I'm trying to win. And if I don't win, I'll think about that all the way home. I'll think about that when I park the car in the garage. I'll think about that when I'm cooking dinner. That's how I'm wired. And what I've had to look at as I get older now, and as I've got other priorities, I still get to train. I still love training, but I've got other priorities. I don't train twice a day. I don't train 6 times a week now. I've got other priorities, and I've had to look at that martial arts journey, and I've had to say, Frank, you can't just be leading by ego. You've got to look at it on other levels, not just wins and losses, not just trying to be the best, not just, whatever, beating everybody or tapping everybody in practice, whatever the goal is. I've got to look at it now, not just as physical exercise, not just as trying to be the best or whatever. I'm looking at it now more like you were, character development, spiritual refinement. I've always known that it could develop and shape and mold character. I've always known that. But I've got to go deeper now that I'm getting older. I can't just lean on it for a good physical workout or even just for the zen of the meditation. I've got to milk it for like every drop I can get for the character development, for the honest feedback, for the spiritual refinement, for somebody like me who's very spiritual. Because then when I look at it through a spiritual prism or like an existential prism or the character development, I'm like, wow, this is so rich for me. Even if it's not my day in practice. And so, I get tapped or whatever, I'm getting beat. It's like I can still have that ride home and say, yeah, but spiritually, I'm getting the experience. I'm getting the wisdom. I'm getting the refinement. I'm balancing, my ego. I'm chiseling. I'm sculpting. I can create something better. Something better is brewing. And if I just measured it by the wins and losses and being ego driven, or if I just measured it by, wow, it's a great workout. It's a great, fantastic workout. I burned a lot of calories. I'm ripped. I'm shredded. I feel strong. I could defend myself. I could defend some innocent person. I could defend someone I love. If I looked at it through that's how the younger Frank looked at a lot of it, right? And now the older Frank is like, hey, you got to go deeper, man, because you can't just whoop everybody on the mat now. I mean, you get older or whatever, you got to have other measures of what's victory look like, what's success, other measures of value. And for me, as I'm getting older, those measures are, well, okay, the character development is still there. I'm still, working on that ego thing. So that's good. I'm still working on the humility thing. So that's good. It's got me there. I got the spiritual refinement. We can check that box. I feel spiritually refined. Physical workout. Yeah, that's going great. Giving back, sharing the gifts, sharing it with some of the younger students, teaching them how to beat me, how to tap me. Check that box. Like you said, the power of the present, it forces me to be present and be focused. Like, can we check that box? And, and so I have to look at it from a different levels now than just the younger Frank, which wanted to just win every competition he could, which wanted to beat everybody in training that he could. I'm forced to change, because if I don't change and evolve, then I basically got to stop, because I'm not going to be king of the mats. I basically have to just stop. If my ego can't handle it, then I just got to stop training, which if I stop training, then I don't really get the benefits of jiu-jitsu, and I walk away from something that's, like you said, I mean, why would I walk away from a lab that gives me so much valuable feedback, that forces me to become a better person, that forces me to become more humble, that forces me to, even at this age, even when on the days I'm losing, I'm actually getting better because I'm still showing up. I'm learning new techniques. I'm seeing new techniques. It's just these young kids, these 20 somethings, these teenagers, they're just getting a lot better. It's their time. It's not that I suck. It's not that I suck. It's just they're getting better and they're younger and they've got all this energy and they can train twice a day and we've got all the priorities. So anyway, that's I'm having to go deeper with it now. And then one other thing I want to say is that the one good thing about when you get older and things change on those mats, every day there's tremendous gratitude, man. Every day I'm on the mats now, like 10x. It's like, hallelujah, I'm here. My body still works well enough, and I'm able to do something I love. And when you're younger, you just take that for granted. And then when you get older, you're like, wow, I'm still able to get on the mats. I'm still able to train. Man, that feels good. Man, the camaraderie. I enjoy it. Now I feel like even though I still want to win all the time in training, I am like nicer to my training partners. Like I wanna show them even more stuff than I ever did before. I wanna like talk to them more about like their life and how things are going. Because I'm just like, damn, I'm just happy to be here. It's not just about winning and losing. It's about I'm just happy to be here. So that's been kind of my journey. Noah, we got the last 10 minutes here. You can give us your thoughts and take us down home stretch.
Thank you, Frank. Nick, thank you for sharing your story today. It takes a measure of courage to be vulnerable, but I believe that part of your experience of becoming a black belt has also enabled you to use your platform as now a new black belt to share with you things that you learn, share with the hard lessons that you've had to go through, give it, where others have an easier ride, and avoid things. So I want to say thank you very much for sharing your story today. It's a very important one for the jiu-jitsu community and the broader community at large. Thank you. Did you have any other final thoughts?
To Frank, really, you said it very well, that the mats, the character development there and the personal development that you get is the experience of that refinement. It makes you a better person, and you start to, you spoke to your ego. You think of ego as being like, oh, I'm the greatest or I'm the best at this. And the lessons that you get in jiu-jitsu teach you that you're not. There's always somebody who can beat you. You lose. You're forced to acknowledge that it's possible to lose, but that makes you appreciate when you do get a win. And when you develop those skills over time, it develops it develops a real confidence in your own abilities because you see the progress, and then you can actually honestly acknowledge your successes. And you have to, just like you have to acknowledge the failures, it's also important to acknowledge your successes, because that is, if you don't do that, then you don't really have the development. And so it it does it does boost your confidence. It does boost your ego, so to speak, because you do develop those things. But you can say with confidence that if this thing arises, I know what to do. And then you can, as I've said before, you can apply that to other things in your life. And
Absolutely.
it helps you be confident in yourself and sure in yourself, but also have the capacity to have that empathy or that humility when it's necessary. You can be honest with your failings and your successes. And that honesty is the thing that will drive real success in your life. And that's the thing that is a real gift out of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy Ray Dalio, the author of Principles, the great, whatever, with all the hedge funds. Ray Dalio talked about one of the pillars of, that big hedge fund he was with was what they called radical transparency, where they'd sit around all the people there, and from the lowest to the highest, and of the employees, and you were allowed to have the radical transparency, like what's going wrong, what do we need to fix. And I guess one of the themes of what we're talking about is it's like a radical self-honesty. It's like we're talking about like not just a company with radical transparency, but like a radical self-honesty that the mats kind of give you. And I really think that that's something that I learned about Nick early on, is like, wow, this guy, like, he went through that experience, and then he's here, man. He's here, and he's going to war, and he's sweating, and he's serious. So Nick, it's been a pleasure to have you. We're grateful to have you. I love having your story on here. And it's perfect timing because you are a new black belt, so congratulations on that. To everybody out there, Everyman BJJ. We record every Sunday, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can email us questions, comments, insights, whatever. everymanbjj@gmail.com. We will see everyone again soon. Noah, thank you so much. You have a great rest of the day. Nick, thank you so much. See you at Whole Foods. Both of you guys at Whole Foods.
That's right.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the congratulations, and yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye, guys.